You got to be able to play around Bloodlust, but it's kind of the general strategy anyway, so when you're playing against a Shaman, you really don't want him to have that many creatures, and if he does, and you think he might have Bloodlust, you know, maybe just take out a few of the crappy ones rather than killing the big ones, just because, you know, the Bloodlust will make all the crappy creatures super powerful. The other really big one is Fire Elemental. So if you're in Arena, if it's turn 6 for a Shaman, he's probably going to play this card. You need a plan for it. So you need to have a creature that has more than 3 health, but sometimes this is not always possible. And if he is going to kill your Fire Elemental, if he is going to kill your creature that has 3 health for free with the Fire Elemental, you kind of want a backup plan for it. So, you know, if you're playing a Druid, maybe have a Starfire, and, you know, you kind of get your value back that way. Or maybe you can have like a Boulder Fist, and the Boulder Fist can trade with a Fire Elemental. Hopefully, he doesn't have a second one to finish your Boulder Fist off. This is one of the best cards in the game. You can't really expect to kill it, you know, and gain value. But, you know, you do your best. You kind of have to be aware that it may happen. And usually the main thing that you need to stay away from is taking enough damage on one of your big creatures so that it may be finished off on turn 6 by the Fire Elemental. So Warlock, you know, it's kind of like Rogue. You got the Soulfire, stuff can happen, there's a lot of different spells, there's the Shadow Bolts, nothing too crazy. Hellfire is not common enough to play around. Shadow Flame is a rare, can't really play around that. Siphon Soul is hard removal, but it's a rare, you can't really play around that. There's just a lot of stuff that happens, and you know, you just hope for the best. It's kind of one of those classes. Against the Warrior, there's a lot of situational cards. There's Execute, but even still, you know, it's good and constructed. It's not that frequent that you'll see in Arena. What is frequent is this little guy right here, Fiery War Axe. So Fiery War Axe will tend to kill your 2-drop and your 3-drop, and you'll be pretty sad when it happens, but it just kind of does. It's one of the super powerful cards. The way to play around this is you play a card that has 4 health, like a Demolisher. Maybe if you're playing a Warrior, I don't know, maybe like an Armor Smith, something like that. Something that can take a hit, that can survive, or that draws you a card, like a Loot Hoarder, like an Acolyte of Pain. You know, maybe even something with Divine Shield, like a Scarlet Crusader. There are some options. You can try to play around Cleave against the Warrior, but Cleave is not that common, and often it's not that difficult to play around it. So just keep in mind that, you know, they might have Cleaved. If you have 2 creatures with 2 health, maybe better to play you know, something else on the board that has more than 2 health as a result. Cruel Taskmaster is actually pretty common, so having a 1 health minion that's, you know, fairly important on your board, you have to expect that it might die to a Cruel Task, and to combat that, you want to have a creature that can kill the Cruel Taskmaster for free. There are a lot of weapons with Warriors. There's the Arcanite Reapers, which tend to kill your Chillwind Yetis and makes you really sad. But more than anything, it's the Arathi Weaponsmith that does it, because when this card comes into play and you have these, you know, 3/2 2-drops, you know, he kills 1 for free, then he's got the Arathi Weaponsmith, which probably kills another one, and he has another charge on his weapon, which probably kills another one. So against the Warrior, you know, if you're mulliganing and you have a lot of 2-drops, you may actually want to drop some of them, as opposed to when you're playing like a Priest. It may be a good idea to keep all of them, just because, you know, they're probably going to survive and make a pretty big impact. Gorehowl is the last card I'll talk about. You know, it's one of those cards that can win him the game. You can kill so many big creatures, but you don't see it that frequently, and sometimes when you do, you know, it's not that big of a deal. The way to play around Gorehowl is usually it's going to be most effective if you're playing like a Priest, where the other weapons sometimes, usually often in fact, don't end up killing your creatures, but a Gorehowl will. So what you do is you just let him attack into your creatures with your weapons. You save an Ooze. If you're ahead, you can play it safe. You can save the Ooze just in case he has a Gorehowl, and that's really the best way to take this card. So there's a lot of small strategies. A lot of it comes to practice. I know I've been talking about this stuff for a while. It's something you really have to play through, but being aware of all these cards, I think, is going to help you guys understand, really help you guys get into the game and see how to play it on a more advanced level of things. So hope you guys see it that way. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Hey guys, how's it going? Preparing here. So there's been some statistics recently put out there that go over, the number of people that tend to really get a certain number of wins in arena, and it's really low. You're talking just a few percent of people are able to get 12 or 11 wins in arena. And, I've kind of gone over a lot of the points, a lot of what it takes. You really need the experience. You got to know what cards are going to be played against you at any given turn, more than likely, and being kind of exclusive about it. So for instance, if you think it's a good time for your opponent to flame strike you and he doesn't flame strike you, you can play as if the opponent doesn't have a flame strike, and hopefully he doesn't draw it next turn or maybe the turn after that. So there's that type of aspect. There's the aspect of just playing the game on your own fairly well. You want to try to not miss the lethal, the legal, the chat legal, and all the rest. You guys know all of that. But there's something that I haven't really talked about, is the style of play. And a few other streamers approached me and talked to me that I have a pretty unusual style of play, compared to them. And I want to talk to you guys about that, and just more specifically, kind of my idea of how I approach selecting the deck and playing through it. So a lot of people play decks fairly aggressively, and you see this quite a bit in Constructed, because in Constructed you can choose all the cards that you want to be playing. In Arena, you can kind of do the same. You can play an aggressive deck, but you need cards that heavily complement it. So for instance, if you're playing Rogue, yeah, you can make a deck full of 2 and 3 drops. And if you have, 1, maybe 2 sprints, and you're lucky enough to run into them right as you run out of cards, you're going to do pretty well. But every now and then, it's not going to work out so well. It's going to be the case where, you play your 2-drop, they play their 2-drop, you play another 2-drop, they play their 3-drop. You play 2 2-drops and they play like Ascension, and you start getting 2 for 1 and you start losing cards, you can't get them back. You're going to run out before your opponent is dead very, very frequently. Now, some people are pretty successful at playing aggro, and there are advantages to playing aggro. Mainly, the games are going to last a lot less time. You're going to be able to do more of them, and maybe for some people, their patience allows them to play better because of this. For me, my strategy is I usually play very slow decks, not always, but usually, and I always play, like, the whole game for me is understanding what my opponent has in his hand. And clearly, because I'm streaming to a lot of people, and for a lot of people, doing well in arena is pretty important, so they get to see my hand at the same time. But for me, the fun of it is just that. Excluding cards, understanding what they might have, and playing with that. Because if you always keep that in mind, you're going to have the advantage, usually, just card for card. And what that means is, yeah, you might take a lot of damage early on, but in the end, you'll probably have more cards than your opponent, you'll probably have a better board than your opponent. Obviously, this has some exceptions, because you can't win every game in arena. But the drafting process is pretty similar across all the decks. There's a lot of good drafting lists out there. Trump's made one, I made one some time ago.
Your magic shall not save
the idea is that these are not absolutes. I made a rogue deck yesterday. I did get pretty lucky, to be honest, but I think I went 12-1 with it. And, I ended up skipping 4 or 3 Assassin Blades. I even picked a Bomber over one near the end. I picked a Chill Wind over one. It was like the second last card. I skipped an Eviscerate for... yeah, I'm not too sure, but it was a card that normally would not be quite as well rated. And I did so just because, I don't really want too many weapons when I played a rogue, even though Assassin's Blade is a great card. I had a Deadly Poison, I had a Perdition's Blade. I kind of wanted a 3rd weapon, but I thought these cards fit the deck a little bit better. It didn't have that many 4-drops. Bomber is really overpowered on a rogue because you can dagger up on 1 or on 2, and you can drop the Bomber if it hits it once. You can finish off with a dagger. If it hits it twice, well, you're in a lot of luck. So, you kind of have to step outside the norm just a little bit, but it's something that experience will dictate, and you can't be too shy from trying. At the beginning of Hearthstone, I 199, I don't know, probably like 8 or 10 times, somewhere around there. So, you know, it's something that you really got to go through, and you know, if you watch the streams and you know, get educated a little bit, maybe the learning curve is not quite as big, but it's something you have to understand. You know, the cards independently are what they are. You can compare them, but as you go through the draft, you want to have a fairly balanced curve. In my opinion, well, on my side of things, with my strategy at least, the best type of curve is to have almost a straight line, and you can mulligan fairly aggressively for 2 and 3 drops, and you know, as long as you don't miss both of them, you're usually fine, because the 4 is a big part of the game. You know, Chillwind Yeti, Senjin Shieldmaster, even the Brewmaster, you know, they're going to be able to take on usually the earlier part of the game that you may have missed up to that point. The other side is, when you're playing, I noticed a lot of people are really aggressive with the cards. You know, they try to play as much as they can. They try to use the coin as early as possible. I kind of like to save these things. You know, I don't really push too much on the board unless I absolutely have to. And even if I have 2 drops, often I won't coin. You know, in some cases, if I don't have a 4, you know, I'll use the 2 on 2, and then on 3 I'll use the 2 and then the hero ability or something like that. So, you know, you really have to be flexible. Hearthstone is a game where it's still, you know, while it is fairly solidified in what you can do in it, it's much better to have the idea, the open mind of, you know, changing things up, specifically doing something that may not be the correct way, but, you know, you might learn something from it, just, you know, to develop your own strategy on how you play through the game. And yeah, don't be afraid to lose. I know losing sucks, trust me, but in the end, you'll probably be a better player if you pay attention enough. So, hope you guys learned something, hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.
I wonder... Nature will rise against you. Well played.